My name is Adrian Miller, and the day my parents cut me out of their will, my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." As if being erased from your own family's future was the same as being left off a dinner invitation. As if watching everything my parents had built go to my older brother, Caleb, was just a paperwork issue. As if I was supposed to smile, nod, and accept that once again, Caleb got everything simply because he was Caleb. I was 34 years old when it happened. Old enough to have my own job, my own apartment, my own life. Old enough that I should not have cared so much. But I did, because it was never really about the money. It was about what the will confirmed. My parents had chosen my golden brother over me one final time, and years later, when Caleb stole their house, drained their savings, and disappeared without a trace, they finally understood what I had been trying to tell them my entire life. But by then, I was done saving people who had spent decades sacrificing me. Caleb was 2 years older than me. Growing up, he was charming, loud, and reckless in a way my parents called special. If Caleb failed, he was misunderstood. If Caleb lied, he was under pressure. If Caleb borrowed money and never paid it back, he was just going through a difficult season. If I made one mistake, I heard about it for months. There were 2 rule books in our house. One for Caleb. One for me. His was written in pencil. Mine was carved in stone. When Caleb crashed my father's car at 19, my parents paid for the repairs and told everyone accidents happen. When I got a parking ticket at 21, my father lectured me for an hour about responsibility. When Caleb quit college because he wasn't built for classrooms, my mother said he had an entrepreneurial spirit. When I worked nights to pay for my own degree, they said I should stop acting like a martyr. That was my childhood. Caleb needed. I adjusted. Caleb failed. I understood. Caleb hurt people. I forgave. By the time I became an adult, I had learned not to expect fairness. But some part of me still hoped that one day, when it really mattered, my parents would see me. That hope died in a lawyer's office on a rainy Thursday afternoon. My parents had called a family meeting. They said it was about estate planning. I should have known better. Caleb was already there when I arrived, wearing an expensive watch I knew he could not afford. My mother sat beside him, patting his hand like he was nervous. My father looked stiff and serious. The lawyer opened a folder and began explaining their updated will. The house would go to Caleb. The investment account would go to Caleb. Most of the remaining assets would go to Caleb. I would receive a small cash amount. A symbolic amount. A polite insult. At first, I thought I had misunderstood. I turned to my father. "Is this a mistake?" He avoided my eyes. My mother gave me that soft, wounded expression she used whenever she wanted me to feel guilty for being hurt. "Adrian, please don't make this ugly." I looked at Caleb. He did not look surprised. Of course he didn't. He knew. They had all known. I said, "You're leaving almost everything to Caleb?" My father cleared his throat. "Your brother needs more support." There it was, the family anthem, "Caleb needs more." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because after 34 years, they still had only one sentence. "He's 40 years old," I said. My mother flinched. "He's rebuilding. He's always rebuilding." Caleb leaned back in his chair. "Here we go." I looked at him. "You knew about this?" He shrugged. Mom and Dad made their decision. Their decision? As if he had not influenced it. As if he had not spent years convincing them I was cold, selfish, and successful enough to not need family. I turned back to my parents. "I helped pay your medical bills when Dad had surgery." My father's jaw tightened. "I never asked you to. I covered your mortgage for 4 months when Caleb's business failed and you gave him your savings." My mother whispered. "That was different. I paid for your new furnace last winter." She looked down. I said, "But Caleb needs more?" My father finally looked at me. "You have always been able to take care of yourself." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Because it sounded like praise. But it was punishment. They had taken my strength and used it as an excuse to give me less love. I stood up slowly. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Caleb looked annoyed. My mother reached for me. "Adrian, don't take it personally." I stared at her hand until she pulled it back. How else should I take it? She began to cry. My father said, "Sit down." For the first time in my life, I did not obey him. "No," I said. "I think I finally understand." My mother wiped her eyes. "Understand what?" I looked at Caleb. Then at my parents. "That I was never your second son. I was your backup plan." Nobody answered. Because nobody could. I walked out of that office and did not speak to them for nearly a year. At first, my parents acted offended. My mother sent messages saying I had broken her heart. My father said I was being childish. Caleb texted me once. Must be exhausting, always playing victim. I deleted the message and blocked him. The silence that followed was painful at first, then peaceful. Without my family, my life became smaller, quieter, and healthier. I focused on work. I bought a small townhouse. I started spending holidays with friends who did not treat my presence like an obligation. I stopped waiting for my parents to choose me. And slowly, I healed. Then, 2 years later, my Aunt Linda called. She was my mother's younger sister and one of the only relatives who had never fully bought into the Caleb worship. "Adrian," she said carefully, "something is going on with your parents' house." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Caleb moved back in." Of course he had. His latest business had failed. His girlfriend had kicked him out. He had debt. My parents, naturally, opened their doors. But this time, Caleb did not just want a room. He wanted control. According to Aunt Linda, he convinced my parents to put his name on the house deed. He told them it would make things easier if something happened to them. He said he could help manage repairs. He said it would protect the house from taxes. He said a lot of things that sounded smart to people desperate to believe him. I asked, "Did they do it?" Aunt Linda went quiet. That was answer enough. I closed my eyes. "They put him on the deed." "Yes, after cutting me out of the will." "I'm sorry." I almost laughed. Not at her. At the absurdity. They had not just given Caleb the future house. They had given him the present one. I wanted to say I was shocked. I wasn't. When people show you who they are for long enough, eventually even their worst decisions become predictable. I told Aunt Linda, "They made their choice." She said softly, "I know. I just thought you should hear it from someone who cares." A year passed. Then another. I heard pieces of news through relatives. Caleb was helping with the house. Caleb was handling their finances. Caleb was looking into refinancing. Every phrase made my skin crawl. Then one Monday morning, I received a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was shaking. "Adrian, please call me. It's urgent." I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I called back. She answered immediately. Before I could speak, she burst into tears. "The house is gone." I sat down. "What do you mean, gone?" My father took the phone. His voice sounded older than I remembered. "Caleb refinanced the house." I closed my eyes. "Of course he did. How much?" Silence. Then my father said, "Almost everything." The story came out in broken pieces. Caleb had convinced them to sign paperwork. He told them it was a small loan to consolidate debt. He said he would use part of it to fix the roof and pay off their credit cards. Instead, he pulled out nearly all the equity in the house. Then he stopped making payments. By the time my parents understood what had happened, the foreclosure process had already started. Their savings were gone too. Caleb had access to their accounts. He transferred money slowly at first. Then quickly. When my father confronted him, Caleb promised to fix it. The next day, he vanished. His phone was disconnected. His social media disappeared. His room was empty. So was the money. My golden brother had stolen their house and disappeared. For several seconds, I said nothing. Not because I felt nothing. Because I felt too much. Anger. Sadness. Vindication. Exhaustion. My mother sobbed into the background. My father said, "We need your help." There it was. The reason for the call. Not an apology. Not the truth. "Need," I said, "did you call the police?" My father hesitated. "He's still our son." I actually laughed then. A cold, stunned laugh. "He stole your house." My mother cried, "He made mistakes." Mistakes. Even now. Even after losing everything. They still could not say what he had done. I said, "No, he committed fraud." My father snapped, "Don't talk about your brother that way." And just like that, any sympathy I had started to die. Because even in the ruins, they were still protecting him. I asked, "What exactly do you want from me?" My father's voice softened. "We need somewhere to stay." I looked around my kitchen. My quiet home. The home I bought without their help. The home they had never visited because their pride mattered more than our relationship. "No," I said. The silence was immediate. My mother whispered, "What?" "No. You cannot stay with me." My father sounded shocked. "Adrian, we're losing our home." "I know. We're your parents. And I was your son when you cut me out of the will." My mother cried harder. "That was different." "No," I said. "It was the beginning of the same story." My father said, "This is not the time for old grudges." That word. Grudge. People love calling it a grudge when they want you to forget a pattern. "This is not a grudge," I said. "This is a consequence." My mother pleaded, "We have nowhere to go." I said, "Then call Caleb." She sobbed, "We don't know where he is." I closed my eyes. "You gave him everything. Now go find him." Then I hung up. For 2 days, I felt sick. Not guilty exactly, but shaken. It is one thing to imagine saying no. It is another to hear your mother cry and still choose yourself. Relatives started calling. Some said I was cruel. Some said my parents were old. Some said family should help family. I asked every single one the same question. Are you letting them stay with you? Most went quiet. That told me everything. They wanted me to be the solution because they did not want to become one. Aunt Linda was different. She called and said, I'm proud of you. I almost broke down. She continued. I offered them a room for 2 weeks, but I told them they need to report Caleb and speak to a lawyer. Will they? She sighed. I don't know. They did not. For months, my parents refused to file charges. They lost the house. They moved into a small rental. My father took a part-time job at a hardware store. My mother sold jewelry she had once promised would go to Caleb's future wife. I should not have found that funny. But I did. The son they trusted with everything had left them with nothing. The son they treated like a backup plan was the only one stable enough to help. And I chose not to. Not because I hated them. Because I finally understood that helping people who refuse to face the truth only makes you part of the lie. 6 months later, my father came to my office. He looked smaller. Thinner. For the first time in my life, he looked like an old man. My assistant told me he was waiting in the lobby. I considered refusing to see him. But I went out. He stood when he saw me. Adrian. Dad. The word felt strange in my mouth. He asked if we could talk privately. I led him into a conference room. He sat across from me, staring at his hands. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered, You were right. I waited. He swallowed hard. About Caleb. Still. I waited. And about us. That was new. He looked up, and his eyes were wet. We taught him there would always be someone to clean up his mess. We taught you that your pain mattered less because you handled it better. I felt my throat tighten. He continued. I cut you out of the will because I convinced myself you didn't need anything from us. I said quietly. I needed parents. He closed his eyes. I know. Those 2 words landed harder than I expected. Because they were too late. But they were also true. My father slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten letter. An apology. A real one. No excuses. No. I'm sorry you felt. No. We were under stress. Just the truth. They had favored Caleb. They had used my independence against me. They had mistaken my silence for consent. They had been wrong. When I finished reading, I folded the letter carefully. My father said, I don't expect money. Good. He flinched, but nodded. I don't expect you to fix this. Good. I just wanted to say it before I lost the courage. For the first time in years, I felt something other than anger. I felt grief. Because this was the father I had needed decades ago. And he had arrived after the house was gone, after the money was gone, after the damage was done. I said, thank you for saying it. He nodded. Can we start over? I looked at him. There was a time when I would have given anything to hear that question. But healing had taught me something difficult. Not every apology earns access. Some apologies only close the wound. They do not reopen the door. I don't know. I said honestly. But not today. He accepted that. Maybe for the first time in his life, he accepted an answer from me without arguing. My mother sent her own letter 2 weeks later. It was messier. More emotional. But still honest. She admitted she had protected Caleb because loving him made her feel needed. She admitted she had treated me like I was strong enough to lose things. She admitted that when I walked out of the lawyer's office, she knew I was right and hated me for making her see it. I kept both letters. I did not invite them back into my life. Not fully. Not quickly. I helped them find a reputable legal aid office. I paid for one consultation with an attorney. Not because they demanded it. Because this time, they had finally agreed to file a report against Caleb. That was my condition. Truth first. Help second. They reported him. The investigation took months. Caleb was eventually found in Arizona, living under a fake business name with money that was almost gone. He had tried to start another company. Of course he had. Another opportunity. Another big plan. Another disaster. When he was arrested, my mother cried for 3 days. But this time, she did not ask me to save him. That mattered. It did not fix everything. But it mattered. My parents never got the house back. They never recovered most of the money. Caleb took a plea deal. He went to prison for a short time and came out blaming everyone but himself. Some people never change. My parents changed slowly. Painfully. Imperfectly. My relationship with them became something cautious. We had coffee once a month. Public places. Neutral ground. No holidays at first. No family dinners. No pretending. If they defended Caleb, I left. If they minimized what happened, I ended the conversation. For once, the rules were mine. Years later, my mother asked me if I would ever forgive them completely. I thought about it. Then I said, I forgave you enough to stop being angry every day. But I will never forget enough to let you rewrite what happened. She cried. But she nodded. That was the closest thing to peace we were ever going to get. People think karma is dramatic. They imagine yelling. Revenge. Public humiliation. Someone falling to their knees begging for mercy. But real karma is often quieter. It is parents sitting in a rented apartment because the child they favored stole the home they promised him. It is a golden son discovering that charm stops working when the money runs out. It is a forgotten son realizing he no longer needs to be chosen by people who never learned how to choose fairly. My parents cut me out of their will for my golden brother. Years later, he stole their house and disappeared. And when they finally came to me, broken and terrified, I did not give them the blind loyalty they had always given him. I gave them the truth. The truth that love without accountability becomes destruction. The truth that rescuing someone from every consequence does not save them. It ruins them. The truth that the child who seems strong still needs protection. And the truth that sometimes the people who were written out of the will end up inheriting the only thing that matters. Peace. I have that now. A home nobody can take. A life nobody controls. A family I chose. And a door that only opens for people who respect what it took to build everything behind it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.